Hello neighbors, it's Brad here at eTrailer, and today we're taking a look and installing the Roadmaster Smart Diodes on a 2023 Jeep Gladiator. When it comes to flat towing your Jeep Gladiator, there's going to be 5 main components that are going to be required to safely do that. The first one is going to be on the vehicle side, being the base plate. That's going to structurally mount to the frame of the vehicle and give you the mounting point for your tow bar as well as your other components. Your tow bar is going to be the connection point between that base plate and the hitch on the RV. And just like a trailer, you have your safety cables. That's going to keep everything together just in case things were to accidentally disconnect. Now you're also going to need a braking system. Today we have the Stay and Play Duo, which is a fixed system. Whether you have a portable or fixed, it doesn't matter. You're going to have a breakaway switch. And this is in case everything was to fail. It's the last line of defense. It'll pull this cable, and that's going to put the brakes on the vehicle, allowing it to come to a stop. That way it's not rolling down the road. We also have our diode wiring, which is going to transmit the light signals from our RV to the taillights on our Gladiator, giving us running lights, turn signals, and brake lights. Now you may want to add a few other things into those components as well, and that would be a charge line, which is going to allow you to trickle charge the battery as you go down the road, and that's just going to tie into your 6-pole. Now we also picked up a stoplight switch on our Gladiator today, which is specific to the Gladiator. It's just a bracket that mounts a plunger on the brake pedal, and that's going to give us the indication that we're braking. Not all braking systems will require that, but if you are doing the Stay and Play Duo, you're going to want to pick that up. Long gone are the days of magnetic tow lights. You've probably seen those on vehicles before, but honestly, a lot of vehicles just aren't magnetic anymore, and having to drape that wire across a vehicle just really isn't that great, and you have to store them, and that's where diodes come into play. These tie into your factory wiring and allow you to hook up the umbilical and get that light signal from the 7-pole on your RV. It's a pretty easy installation overall. It's just going to be wiring run from the 6-pole back to the taillights on your vehicle where you splice into them. Seems scary, but these are super reliable. The smart diodes are specifically for vehicles with LED taillights that have variable voltage, and Jeeps with park sense are going to require a smart diode. It makes the installation just about the same as the other diodes, but it's going to allow you to have that variable voltage. That way when you have your running lights or your brake lights or turn signals, it's going to account for that variable voltage difference. The diodes just act as an electrical check valve to make sure there's no backfeed, so this isn't going to cause any issue while you're normally driving your vehicle, and when you plug in your umbilical, they'll be ready to go. So you can see they're going to mimic our turn signals right now, but you're also going to get your running lights and brake lights as well. So that's going to cover it, keeping you safe and legal. Now, something to take in consideration as well is some braking systems are going to require tapping into those diodes. And we have a Stay and Play Duo that we use today on this vehicle, and that's exactly what we did. So when running it, if you do have a system that requires tapping in, I just suggest pulling up an extra loop. But I'm going to walk you through all the steps to make sure you get yours installed. If you do determine that maybe this is something beyond your scope, you don't really want to tackle it, maybe you don't have the space, the tools, or even the want to do it, you can use our eTrailer dealer locator to find someone close to you to get this installed. But for you DIYers at home, follow along and we'll get these installed on your Gladiator. To get diode wiring installed on your Jeep is going to be pretty easy to do, and the first thing that I'd recommend doing is grab your spool of wire and just make a loop around your 6-pole bracket. Leave yourself enough obviously to tie into it. Now you'll see this red wire. We're also going to be putting a charge line on our Jeep today, so that's why we have this excess here. And if you are running a charge line, I'd recommend also tapping this in because we'll be attaching it to the 6-pole at the same time. And once you attach it through here, I just drilled through my rock guard to pass my wires through, and depending on your braking system is going to determine the way that you route from here. If you have a Stay and Play Duo, I believe the InvisiBrake as well, they tap into the diode wiring. So we're going to want to pull a length of it up into the engine bay to be able to splice into that. It's a lot easier to do up there than underneath the vehicle. So all I did was kind of zip tie this up underneath here, and just kind of using this bracket here, that's going to make sure that our wires aren't going to be rubbing on our sway bar. I then just routed this up, so I'll lower the Jeep down and show you where I pulled it up. So I just kind of routed my wires along here, and what I'm going to do is just take a loop. It doesn't have to be a large one here, but just tape this up, and that's going to give you enough slack to be able to splice into that. Now, something else that we're going to want to do for two reasons. We're going to split our white wire and peel it back because we have a factory ground that's located on our firewall that makes for a nice grounding spot. I try to use the same grounding point for all of my components. That way, if there is a grounding issue, you can go back to that one spot. And peeling the wire back, not only are we going to be grounding our diode wiring, which we need to do, but also all the extra white wire can become a jumper wire for when we run from taillight to taillight for our running light signal. So I'll go ahead, I'm going to tape this up, and then we're going to get our white wire attached to our factory ground. Now the factory ground, I just remove the nut that's on there. It's a 10 millimeter to do that, and to get a ring terminal on there, unfortunately the kit doesn't have a ring terminal that's going to be large enough, so I just had an extra here, and maybe in the rest of your braking kit or whatever you're going to be doing later on, you might have one. If not, you might want to source a larger one. You can also use a self-tapping screw to mount up in the metal. Now this is going to be a larger diameter, so I just loop my wire over itself to give it a little extra bite. I'll crimp this down, give it a quick tug just to make sure that it's on there nice, and then we can get our ground attached. The remaining 3 wires we're going to route down in the engine bay. Now we do need to be careful because we have the exhaust right there, but I'll get this passed down and I'm going to start routing it to the back where eventually we're going to tap these into our tail lights. So I'll get that done and then show you how I ran it. And once you run your wires down into down the firewall, I found that there's going to be this insulated wire loom, and yes, it's close to the exhaust, but I think if we zip tie it up nice and tight to where it doesn't make contact, we should be okay. So I just kind of followed this down, and we continue all the way back until we get to this spare tire area right above the pumpkin, the differential here. This is where I split it off. So you'll see our green wire will run over to our passenger side, and that just, I use a spot here on the spring perch to zip tie that up, keep it nice and tight, and then eventually just make my way over to the taillight pocket. So we'll have our wire here. Now you may notice this white wire. This was the excess that we cut off. I just ran this across where our hitch is located, and that's going to be the jumper between the 2 wires. So here we find our yellow and brown, same kind of thing. A little trickier here, I just kind of went by the spare tire and zip tied that up. But this is going to allow us to be able to get to both the taillights and still have extra wire. So at this point, I'll go ahead and lower down our Gladiator, and we'll start to take our taillights out. We're going to be splicing into the factory wiring, so in order to get our taillights out and be able to get to that wiring, there's just going to be 2 8mm screws, so we'll get these removed. And once you have that taken out, the taillight should come out fairly easily. What I recommend doing sometimes is just kind of give it a wiggle back and forth, and a lot of times that'll help loosen it up. And you'll see that there's just some alignment tabs that go into here. So if it's giving you a little bit of trouble, just bump along the side, just being gentle, but you go straight out. Now at this point, you'll see that we have the wires kind of wrapped in this blue tape, and we're going to want to peel this back to gain access to our wires, and we're going to do this on both sides. So if you can find the end of the tape and unravel it. That's going to be great. If not, just be very careful, and I'll make just a small cut on our tape to gain access, because when we tie these in, I like to go a little bit further back so we can tuck those diodes back when we put the taillights in place. So I'll just snip this, making sure we don't damage any wires in the process. And there's also a rubber coating around this along with that tape, so you may need to splice. I don't know if peeling that tape back is going to do it all for you. Now peeling this back, you may notice that there is a plug here, and you can separate this if you want to tie in the diode, but the fact that this is all plastic pushed in, it kind of keeps that wiring nice and tidy in the pocket. I think it makes more sense for us to tie it in post-plug or towards the taillight. And on this side, we're going to be looking for our green wire that's solid. So once you find that, you can go ahead and make a cut. And we'll just get our factory wires prepped first, so just strip this back on both ends. And you're going to grab your diodes and pull off 2 of the spade connectors. And we'll get these crimped down. And anytime you crimp down something, you do want to give it a quick tug just to make sure that it's a solid connection. It's not going to become loose over time. You don't want to have to go back and track any of those loose connections if it's not working. So just make sure that it's a nice crimp the first time. And with those crimped in place, we'll take our diode and we'll make this attachment first. So the first thing we'll do is we have our car out. That's going to go towards the taillight, so we'll just plug this in. Car in is just going to be that corresponding wire. On the driver's side, you're going to do the same thing, and it just so happens that our solid green wire is also what we're going to be using yet again. So with these connections made, we need to pull up the wires that we ran back, and you can look straight down and see a pretty good opening. Main thing is on the driver's side, there's this strut here. Just make sure it's obviously not making contact with that. So I'll route those wires up. On our driver's side, I have this pulled up. I just ran a zip tie on the other factory wire loom to keep it away from that strut. And we obviously have a decent amount of extra wire here, so I'm going to cut this back and separate your yellow and brown. And we'll first start by getting our spade terminal on our yellow wire first. And on our connection here, we're going to have our RV brake in. So this will be for our turn signal and brake lights. So we'll just plug that in here. And then for our tail lights, which is going to be our running lights, we're going to have that jumper wire. So what we're going to do is strip back both ends on the white and brown wire. And strip it back a little bit extra here because we're going to be putting these together in one butt connector. It makes it a little bit easier to twist them up. And you'll see included in the kit is going to be a yellow butt connector. So with those tied together, we'll slide this over and crimp that down. And with the small length of the extra white wire we have, we'll put a single wire, and that's going to go to our RV tail in. The final wire that we'll need to connect on this side is going to be our ground wire, and also included in the kit is going to be a small length of white wire, and we're just going to be self-tapping this in with a ring terminal somewhere in our metal. That's obviously not going to cause any issue, so I figure if we drill it somewhere in this area, there's nothing behind here, that should be a safe spot. Now I just used a punch to give us a dimple to get this started. If you want to, you can also drill just a small pilot hole so it's not walking around on you. But this is going to allow us to get that nice chassis ground. And then when you tighten down a self-tapping screw, it's important not to keep going. It'll actually strip out the threads you just created. So as long as your ring terminal is not able to be rotated, you should be fine. At this point, we have this side done. And what I like to do is grab some electrical tape and just kind of tape everything up here. That way our spade connectors don't become loose over time, and just kind of get everything nice and tidy and zip tied up around this factory wire loom to keep everything out of the way, and we can get our taillight put back in place. And our other side is going to be super easy. So we have our ground just like before. Our green wire that we pulled up will go to the RV brake in, and that white wire that we jumpered over on the hitch side is going to be the RV tail in. So again, I'll get these all taped up. There's also a double-sided adhesive on the diode that once you kind of get it bundled up, you can stick it to part of the metal. Just make sure you have clearance for your taillight to go back in. Now up front, we'll make our connection to our 6-pole, and something that you're going to want to pick up, obviously with your flat toe setup, is going to be a 6-pole. Sometimes you'll get one with your tow bar, depending on the brand that you pick up. We have the Roadmaster Nighthawk, which does include this. If not, you are going to want to get this. That way we can get our connection to our umbilical. Pretty easy to get this set up as well. The first thing is take the boot that's on the back side, and we'll just slide this over our wires. And we're just going to strip back each of these ends about 1/4 of an inch. This 6-pole end, to get the wires in, it's just going to be small Phillips head screws. Now I recommend just backing them out. Don't take them out completely because they're really small, and if you drop them, they're going to be a hard time to find. But just backing it out will open up the space. So we'll start here with this tall terminal. If you have a charge line like I mentioned earlier, we'll get that attached, and that goes in this tall one. And the rest of them, there's going to be molded in letters along the 6-pole right by the terminals, and that's going to denote exactly where we need to put our wires. So at the top here we have TM. It's going to be our tail markers, which is our brown wire. So at that 12 o'clock position, we'll get that in place. And when tightened down, just make sure that it's snug enough to hold the wire in place, but don't go too tight. You can actually damage the wires in the process, so just snug enough to hold it. The next one we have is GD for ground. That'll be our white wire. And then we have LT for left turn signal. That'll be our yellow. And then we have RT for our right turn signal, which is green. When you have them all attached, it should look like this. And what we like to do here is take a little bit of RTV silicone and just kind of fill in all these gaps. Reason being is it lives on the front of your vehicle, and you want to make sure that long term we're not going to have any water that's going to break down the connection. So I'll go ahead and coat these all up. Now we'll slide the boot over, and what I like to do is put a little bit of electrical tape around that seam. And if you want, you can backfill this with that silicone as well. If not, I recommend leaving the tape here. And to clean up these wires, I grab the wire loom that's included, and we'll just kind of stuff that into the boot to give it a nice clean look. Now we'll just mount up our 6-pole to our bracket. And we're going to need to test to make sure that it's going to be working before hitting the road. So at this point, if you have your RV ready, grab that in your umbilical. We'll get it plugged in and run through the light sequence. So have someone run through the light signals while hooked up to your vehicle, and stand at the rear. Make sure the lights work in configuration. So the first thing we'll have is our running lights. Next we'll do a left turn signal, a right turn signal, and then finally our brakes. With everything working properly, all that's left to do is get the rest of your flat toe components set up, and then you'll be ready to hit the road. If this video helped you get your diodes installed on your Gladiator, please leave a comment on our video. It definitely helps us make our videos that much better, and also share information with other neighbors that might be installing diodes on their Gladiator. My name's Brad, and that was a look and installation of the Roadmaster Smart Diodes on a 2023 Jeep Gladiator.